After hearing the word from Captain Pulaski, the drone fleet wasted zero time. They began deploying immediately. They grabbed up all their ships and immediately disappeared into FTL. Pulaski sat there on the bridge like most everyone else and just watched them. Watched them as they disappeared into the breach itself, giving that strange burst of colors that every ship does when it jumps to FTL. They watched on the sensors, and they noticed that the unknown fleet was actually moving faster than before. That was strange, but not completely unexpected. They watched closely until the drone fleet itself left sensor range. And as they did, everybody just went back to what they were doing, and that was rebuilding. As the rebuilding continued, the roads were built, houses were set up, fields, or in this case, marshes, were made to gather any type of edible material. Also, woodlands were repaired and replenished as fast as possible. As the tuva actually subsist mainly on insects, they need something that is friendly to the insects. The marshes themselves, where the insects breed, and the woodlands, where they actually travel to, search for their own food. Unfortunately, some of the flora and fauna had been either brought to complete extinction or so close that a few additional means had to be taken care of, which means that they had to clone multiple species of insect along with multiple species of plant just to actually get them out there so there would actually be food. Though they knew that the tuva would end up eating far more than they had to, they still needed to get at least some food out there. They couldn't rely on imports. Only a few of the actual drone ships did stay on the planet. In particular, those that were condensing and cleaning water and passing it out to the public. They actually worked so well that the general population was just amazed. This is the first time they'd had clean water in years, and now they didn't just have water, they had it in abundance. Along with this, there was the terraforming ships, which were aiding human terraforming ships, but there was a strange anomaly with them. As it turned out, the human ships were actually more effective, more efficient than the drone ships themselves, though the human terraforming ships were much larger. Judging from their size at 3.5 times larger, they were working at well over 10 times the efficiency, which did surprise everybody, but they remembered that the drone fleets just might need to get the kinks out. The free tuva that had landed aided each other as much as possible. They brought themselves back from the brink, and humans aided as much as they possibly could. If a species was far too alien, anybody, even accepting gifts, would be very hesitant. But the fact of the matter is, except for the fact that the tuva are reptilian, they look very, very similar to humans. Although most of the Tumans thought they looked very disgusting to humans. But this is when the humans actually surprised them, as they looked at the new, thinner tuva and told them that they look much more appealing. As well as that, it was well noted that they were in much, much better health. They could move faster, they could stretch more, they could work much longer hours without even getting exhausted. Those that had been living in exile were still rotund, which means they got burned out very, very quickly. This seemed to almost disgust most humans, as humans nowadays, since they lived for centuries, sometimes millennia, tended to make themselves look as good as possible. And the tuva, especially the thinner ones, noticed this. And as it turns out, since they look more like humans than the yippies, a few of them decided to be comforted by humans. One of the main comforting effects is the fact that humans are homeothermic, which means, at least to the tuva, they are extremely pleasant to the touch, especially when one wants to actually sleep. They would sit there and just wrap themselves across a human, but one of the tuva that was a bit rotund, they would be told, "Get off of me!" very, very quickly. Thankfully, they're actually unable to procreate with each other, but because of that, they decide to use each other for stress relief. And in some of the cases, for those that had gone through so much torture, They wanted to feel actually alive again. Even the AI tried to help in this regard, but not for the reasons you would think. They did have relations with the Tuvas that wanted to. However, when it came to the AI, they were actually trying to get more stimuli, as being stuck in a rut is absolute torture for them. They don't need to actually release energy, they actually want more input, and they got plenty of it. Over time, the Tuva homeworld was returning to its agrarian roots, which means they're self sufficient. And it was proven that they were completely self sufficient less than 2 days before the drone fleet actually returned. And when they returned, everybody immediately asked, how'd it go?
Mission annihilation. Status complete. Fleet status active. Unit status 88%.
Hearing that they were down to 88%, which means they had actually lost more and they'd been recovering on the way back, this surprised everybody. They wanted to know exactly how in the hell this was even possible, and that's when they got the video. A lot of video. And everybody looked over the mission and they all paused. It didn't matter if they were military personnel or not, they were just amazed at this. What they found out is that the Yippie fleet had actually figured out how to track the drone fleet through FTL, which means that when the fleet arrived, they were already under fire. This actually gave the Yippies first strike capability, and in this situation or in any situation, first strike capability is something that should never, ever be underestimated. If you can get first strike capability and actually disable or destroy part of your enemy, then your chances of winning are almost assured. Since the drone fleet was caught semi-flat footed and without all the ships in their fleet at that point, they were a little less effective, but they were not exactly going to go down easy. Dreadnoughts unfortunately took direct hits, and this scorched much of their armor and actually paused them from actually deploying the rest of their fighters, bombers, and everything else. Still, they were able to fight. They immediately deployed their weapon systems and began fighting back, though not as efficient as they were completely burning up from the direct hits. Many of them, you could see if just looking at them, were completely scorched. This is why, because the Titans struck as they came out FTL, they couldn't deploy anything, which made things a bit more difficult. Still, they did act with mechanical precision. They were given the total losses on the enemy side after such a horrendous back and forth, mainly through energy weapons and massive slug shots. Thankfully, the Titans still only could fire their 2 shots before they were completely glowing red hot. One of which did try to fire a third and just melted down right there. The internal core of the engine quite literally got so hot that the whole thing just turned into a ball of molten metal sitting there in space. And because you can't dissipate heat very fast in space, it was still there. It's still burning. And it's one of 9 Titans destroyed. A smaller number, which is probably the only reason why the drone fleet didn't get torn apart even worse. Total dreadnoughts destroyed for the Yippies, 11. Total battleships destroyed for the Yippies, 17. All other Yippie vessels saw their big guns get taken down and pretty much ran for it. Unfortunately, they weren't getting all that far. Unfortunately, by best estimates, 156 ships, mainly corvette size or maybe frigate size, are the ones that got away. Still, that's a fairly large number. As everybody reviewed the battle several times, it was clear that after the Titans' fall, and the dreadnoughts soon after, the Yippies pretty much had their balls fall off and just ran for it. Some of the larger ships that had already taken damage seemed to try and stay and fight. Maybe they were a screening force. It didn't matter. They fell fairly quick. After the review, it was decided to wait to hold up because everybody has to be ready for the next target. They need every single fleet at 100% or better at this point, and it's going to take a while before the drone fleet actually repairs itself. And the next target's a major one. It's the HFY homeworld. When the announcement went out, the HFY got so excited that they actually started flapping their wings, fluttering all the time, which was a sign of excitement and frustration and many other signs depending on which way they swayed, which was difficult for most humans to understand. All they knew is that the HFY knew that soon they would go home. However, they understood it would take time. They were patient, for sure, but it was still going to be difficult for them to stay calm because they just wanted to go in, even with the 24 ships they had left, most of which were just cargo ships, and they wanted to just take their own planet, but they had to wait. Unfortunately, the Tuva would not be joining the fight. They needed to help their own, and once all the humans backed away, the Tuva are going to be on their own once again. They could call for help, but they would have to hold out until reinforcements get there, which suited them just fine. With the front lines pushing farther and farther away from their sector, they weren't exactly giving a shit. During the buildup of personnel and ships, everyone continued to aid the Tuva until they could completely survive on their own. The entire planet was already secured of enemies, but they had to make sure that all the equipment was there so that they could harvest what they needed and they were going to be able to survive. Over this time, all the color actually came back to those that had been under savagery for years. They now had that strange lime green of their scales and the solid jade eyes that seemed to look right through your soul. Some humans wanted to stay, but not for protection. And at this point, no one really cared. As long as they were willing to protect the Tuva homeworld if it was attacked, which they were more than willing to do, taking their own weapons, their own ships, and being ready to hold the line if anything is needed. In fact, a few of them said that they would test their own metal on the colony worlds, but the colony worlds didn't need to be touched. As it turned out, when the Tuva home system, home planet itself, was completely cleared out, all the colonies self-evacuated of the Yippies, all of them. The moment their carefree lifestyle was threatened, these Yippies just got up and bolted. The ones who were on those colony worlds just didn't have the stomach for any type of battle, nor did they have the ships. It was clear that these were personal transports, maybe pleasure yachts or something like that. And immediately, humanity moved in. The Tuva actually raced them there, but at this point, you're not beating a human ship to target. What they did find was, of course, a build-up of Yippies, but they also did find a few more Tuva survivors. Not many, but a few, and this put a giant grin on everyone's face. Unfortunately for everyone else, when humans smile, it makes them very nervous. Over this build-up time, human ships continue to be upgraded. Many of them get new sensors. Some ships show up with even thicker armor or a different armor component. Some show up with greater weapons. And they all got an engine upgrade, every single one of them. More often than not, what would happen is a personal transport would simply leave Tuva space, heading back towards Sol, and return just a few weeks later, looking a lot meaner than it was. Many times with new weapons, new armor, or in some cases, just a whole new ship, a bigger one. One with more weapons, but also more living space, because it doesn't matter where humans are, they want to be comfortable. The drone fleet took much longer to get to 100% than everybody expected. However, they appreciated the fact that they didn't have to run as much. The drone fleet had to deal with the scorched armor, destroyed weapons that needed to be ejected or completely melted down or replaced. They also needed to replace any units that they had lost, and only certain ships are able to build these other smaller vessels. And there was also the upgrading, something everybody was surprised of. When they simply heard
upgrading
come through, they didn't understand. The answer they got was strange. They actually got a picture of one of their own ships. It's called the Jonesing. This is a direct fire dreadnought that had actually proven faster than the drone fleet's main ships. It had also proven that its weapon systems actually outpaced the drone fleets. Not by much, but they did. And this is when the drones came back with another message saying,
keeping up with the Joneses.
Once again, Pulaski was on the bridge of the flagship, a newly commissioned dreadnought called All or Nothing. After receiving confirmation of the jump, everybody jumped in sequence once again, with the drone fleet leading the way, as it seemed like they insisted on being the first ones there, followed by the humans, followed by everybody else. And as they got ready to jump, Pulaski actually got on the radio and said, "Since we're going to liberate the FA, let's show these yippies that we're not just going to give them the bird." Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on Part 7 of this ongoing series. Now, before I go, I need to say that today's winner is Julius Boone, with MTF Guard coming in a really close second. And I also need to send out some ginormous thank yous to the supporters of this channel, and they are Prozac and Pancakes, MTF Guard, Erica Gem, SS Demon, Guardian Sage, Brian Kemp, Steve Ewan, Douglas Scarborough, and Joseph Blosh. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax.
Ejecting pilot.